Disorder having broken out.
So, hello again and welcome everybody to Praxis TV. And today I'd like to introduce my guest, which is Lizzie Fletcher, founder of Unity News, to the show. And it's great to have you here. Thanks very much for coming on, Lizzie.
Hi, Mandy. I'm really pleased to be here.
Thank you. So the first question that I always ask everybody is, are you yourself working class?
Well, I never had a distinction for what I was. My father used to sing, "We'll keep the red flag flying here" every day in his dulcet tones. My mother, however, was a Tory councillor.
Right.
So I didn't really think I didn't have anything to do with politics, didn't know, and it's never taught at school, which I find is terrible, really, because if it was taught in school, then we would all be a lot better at critical thinking.
Yes.
So as it was, I just accepted that my dad was a unionist and a shop steward. He was an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
My mum was just my mum. You know, I didn't really think about what sort of politics she held.
Mm-hmm.
So I never described myself as anything, working class, middle class, or anything.
Mm-hmm.
But I have, since getting involved in politics, discovered that other people think I'm far too intellectual or far too middle class to be working class.
Right. Okay. Right. So, what is your perception of what would be different between someone who's middle class and someone who's working class? What are the...
Well, when I was a kid, nothing. I didn't know there was no difference.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was just people, friends or not friends, and none of whether they were my friend or not was not dependent on what hierarchy they thought they might possess.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I think that the difference, if there is any, is that it's prejudice.
Mm-hmm.
Based on prejudice.
Yeah.
Or trying to, it is created by people.
It is, yes, certainly it is. Yeah, it's not a physical genetic condition that you're born with, is it? It's something that's ingrained within the society and how it's organized and who gets to succeed.
I think so, yeah. If you're going to have a definition of working class, middle class, one is working class and one is middle class, then it has to be based on learnt behavior.
I mean, one of the reasons that, when we first met, it was at the conference in 2019, Labour Party conference in Brighton, obviously before the general election, and we didn't really know what was around the corner at that point, but it was still feeling fairly ominous, I think, at that point, but there was still hope, and I had put together this motion for conference. It didn't go anywhere. But I wanted to hand that across to Jeremy, because at that time I was feeling that it needed addressing, that we had such a low number of people from what I would describe as working class backgrounds in that, in terms of people who had sort of routine, low status, manual jobs or manual jobs, as opposed to people who had managerial or professional level jobs. Also working class, within that category, you'd include people that have disabilities or they're on benefits or whatever. And that representation in the Labour Party across MPs is just 3%, whereas the occurrence in the population of people that are in those kind of jobs or on benefits is upwards of 30%. And in the Labour Party, it used to be a lot higher. There was a lot higher representation of people from those kind of backgrounds. So I feel and felt then that needed to be addressed within the party that's there to be of and for the working class. It feels to me wrong that we haven't. But class is something that is talked about more within the Labour Party now, and it's mentioned in the Democracy Review, and classism as well. So as a form of sort of, as you described it, as prejudice. That's something that seems to be acknowledged as well. But it's not acknowledged to the extent that we have, like a socialist society for people that are working class in the same way that we do for other underrepresented groups and so on. We don't have working class officers in our CLPs, and we don't collect data and statistics. If we have statistics about class representation in the party, they tend to come from outside, people who've done studies from outside. So I think there's still quite a lot that we need to do. And the thing about I sell my labour is something that quite often comes up, because people say, Marx would describe everyone who sells their labour as working class, everyone who has to work to pay a mortgage. But then you could say, technically, in that case, Boris Johnson sells his labour, so it's like and if most of the people that are selling their labour are doing a particular type of work and from a particular type of class background and culture, then there must be prejudice within the system. There has to be. There's some reason why that's happening. So that was kind of the that was how we met, because I was trying to get that motion to hand it to Jeremy, and then I think he spoke to you because he knows you already. So are you sort of in touch with Jeremy?
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
Yes. And he's more involved with the Peace and Justice Project.
Yeah.
Than, of course, since his membership of the Labour Party was all but revoked. Mm-hmm. So I think that what he tried to achieve, and what he achieved to a great degree, was the bringing along of all people to the cause.
Yeah.
And that didn't differentiate between anybody. Everybody has a voice. Everybody has a voice that deserves to be heard. And Jeremy and I totally agree on that principle, that every voice has value.
Yeah.
And everybody should be heard. And if you are in a position of where you can enable people that don't normally have their voice heard to be heard, then that is the best thing we can do. So I know that if Jeremy had won, if Labour had won the 2019 election, at that time I was very hopeful at that conference. I thought that how could people be so stupid or as not to realise that it was propaganda, media spin, and lies and smears that were cloaking their eyes? And why couldn't they see past that to what an absolutely enabling and fruitful thing that could come from it? So if he had won, we would be in a quite different world now.
Yeah.
Because before Jeremy was leader of the Labour Party, I went to meet David Miliband, and he would speak at me, and I would meet Ed Miliband, and he would speak at me. I would meet Tony Blair, and he would speak at me. Whereas Jeremy would speak with me.
Yeah.
And I'm just an ordinary person. I joined politics because I feel extremely passionate about citizen assembly. So, which is where everybody comes together, and everybody should be included in every decision that we make as a country.
Yeah.
And yes, you can't please all the people all the time. But instead of just pleasing yourself, like the government seems to do at the moment, we must have a consensus built. Anyway, at the 2019 election, if Labour had won, we would have all gone into Parliament, not just Jeremy and John and the PLP.
Mm-hmm.
We would all have gone into Parliament because there was we already had on the shelf a folder full of files of independent media.
Yeah.
So all of us would have got fair funding
Yeah.
to produce our media.
Yeah.
People like you would have had the space and given the voice to be able to put your motion.
Mm-hmm.
And all the other working class people, disabled people, during the 5 years that Jeremy was leader, we all got to work in the House of Commons, and we all got to work with our MPs and talk with our MPs. And, friendships were formed, and, that would have been such a wonderful occasion because it was all of us going to go into Parliament, not just the Labour Party, PLP.
That's a much healthier culture.
Yeah, much healthier culture.
Yeah, and it
I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting to hear it. I don't know. I think a lot of what happened during the Corbyn that period of a really intense few years, I think so much of it was reactive because there were fresh bombs going off, and weapon, like, sort of, I don't know, what do you call them, grenades being thrown in, and sabotage really left, right and center. And I think that a lot of it ended up being reactive, and we didn't get to always hear as much detail. I don't think the public got to hear as much detail as directly from Jeremy about what that would look like and how it would be different. I
don't think they heard anything of his plans, because they didn't platform him. They deplatformed him.
Yes.
There was say there's 100% of political media. Of the 100% of political media, I would say 70% of it during the entire 5 years, 70%, if not 80 or 85% of it, was all about anti-Labour.
Yeah.
If not outright conservative support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there are academic studies, aren't there, that have measured that and back that up. And it's amazing to me that you see, the minute that happens, you don't have a democracy. The minute the media is doing that, your democracy that's it, it's gone, it's over. And yet it doesn't ever seem to have been picked up. I don't know how governments get away and how media outlets get away with being as horrifically biased as they were, and it be academically proven and no action be taken. Is there no accountability? Is there no way of,
Well, no, we see that now because of the blatant misappropriation of public funds to Tory donors for PPE contracts. And all the contracts that we see going out of government are all public money. They're all taxpayers' money. They're all the people that earn £7 an hour, below minimum wage. By the time they take it home, it definitely is. All those people who are paying tax pay more tax than any of the corporates do. Look at Amazon. It doesn't pay a penny. I think it paid £1,400 tax in 1 year. And yet its profits are astronomical. And, so that's just one of the corporates. There are many. But it's all capitalism. And the thing is that everybody was saying, I believed myself that we had a good case, and I had absolutely neglected to take into account that not one single member of the general public who don't go online, who don't read our alternate media, who don't talk politics, so many people don't talk politics. Well, how did that come about, by the way? But when we were young children, even, we were told, oh no, the two things that we don't talk about is politics and religion. Thank you very much. So without discussing politics, it stops us taking part. And so 90%, I would say 90% of this country be they working class or middle class or whoever they may be, read the newspaper, watch the TV news, and venerate members of the parliament, think that they're better than them when they're not. They're definitely not. Some of them are a lot worse than the worst criminals that you can think of.
Yeah.
And how else did they get into that position? You know, you have to be pretty ruthless, don't you? And, you know, it just, I hadn't taken into account the fact that nobody was told the truth, any truth whatsoever, in the entire 5 years that Jeremy Corbyn was leader of the Labour Party. They weren't told one jot of truth. So how did we expect that people would vote for him? You know, when I was campaigning, and I campaigned for Jeremy, of course, in 2019 and 2017, and people were spitting at me by 2019.
Yeah,
you know, spitting at me and screaming, Jeremy Corbyn's a terrorist, an IRA supporter, you know, and we would be physically attacked, and by ordinary people. Well-dressed, well-spoken people, working class people would swear at us. The local punk would swear at us, as well as the biker, as well as the shopkeeper, because that's all they knew. That's all they heard.
Yeah.
It's not just working class, it's all classes, isn't it? If there are such a thing as class.
I agree with you. I think I noticed a big difference between campaigning in 2017 and 2019. The mood had darkened so much.
Absolutely,
you know, it was like kind of aggression and anger that was more noticeable. And you think, how could anyone? You
know, all the people who voted for Brexit, which yes, perhaps is a large part of the red wall and a large part of what used to be Labour Party voters, voters, working class to their roots, ex-miners, you know. And what did the Conservatives do to the miners? Yet they voted them in their droves, because they thought nobody was hearing them. Because nobody was platforming Jeremy or any of us. So if Kerry-Ann Mendoza from the Canaries, she went on Question Time or something, you know, once or twice during that 5 years, perhaps 10 times. But she was ostracized while she was on it. She was attacked while she was on it. Well, everybody was. Everybody. You were only invited onto mainstream media to be vilified and attacked. Or no platformed, or oh well, you're the silly lefty. So you know, it was horrendous. And how can we expect people, whoever they are, to know anything when nobody tells them anything? And the mainstream media weren't telling them anything, and they still aren't telling them anything.
And it ties also back to what you were saying about education at school, you know, that we don't get taught about politics. I mean, now there's this thing where teachers are not allowed to talk about anything that's perceived to be anti-capitalist. So the only economic system that they're able to teach kids about is capitalism. I was saying that to my daughter the other day, and she said, well, how's that going to work? Because a lot of the texts that are compulsory are actually socialist. The spirit of them is socialist. So how are they going to square that? And I thought that was a good question. I don't know, maybe they're going to change the texts or something, but I wouldn't
be surprised if they're going to change the text, but I would say that what they do is they stop or they inhibit critical thinking. And, you know, a good teacher will always show you where to look, not tell you where to look. Show you where to look and let you investigate and learn yourself. So that, I think, obviously there will still be teachers that will, regardless of what trouble they may get into, will still teach critical thinking and will still teach properly, nicely, kindly. but a lot of people, especially, the people that have grown up within the system that we have,
Mm-hmm.
they are running up, banging their head against a wall, aren't they?
Absolutely. I mean, if teachers are kept busy, so busy, and the curriculum is packed with all this rote learning, I think that this is what teachers have said, and the NEU has also said, that they've appraised, what kids are learning, what teachers are required to teach them through this lockdown period, had a closer look at it and realised that it's gone more and more towards rote learning. So it's just memorising facts rather than, as you said, critical thinking or debating or anything like that.
Creative thinking,
the kids
all the creative studies have gone from school.
So if they
sorry, go on.
if they overstuff the curriculum, there isn't so much time because debating and developing critical thinking takes more time, doesn't it? Than.
Well, it takes more involvement.
Yeah.
And so if you're being talked at, it's like the same with Jeremy and his leadership.
Yeah.
What should we call that? Because it's not about personality, it's about the politics, it's about the structures and the policies that he was bringing forward, and that we were all bringing forward. So it wasn't actually, could it have been anyone? Perhaps it could have been anyone. But as it happened, it was Jeremy Corbyn. And but we can call it his leadership of the party during those 5 years achieved a huge amount, really, but no one ever heard about it. And I think that it's all about being talked to or being talked with, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
same as the teacher. The teacher will ask everybody to read a paragraph from the book that your class is reading, and then you'll have a debate on the origins and the sources of that book, or debate certain points made in that book. But will that happen anymore? Same as art's gone from the curriculum, music's gone from the curriculum, art history. What else has gone from the curriculum?
I think.
And what else will go?
Yeah, and I don't know, anything that's going to encourage people to think and be free thinking, I would imagine. Yeah, I mean, in private, well, not private schools, in public schools, I would imagine in private schools as well, there is much more emphasis put on debating societies and debating skills, isn't there, and things like that. Their kids in those schools, they get to do those things. I don't see why children in state schools, how we can justify that not being valid within state schools as well, because if anybody does want to enter politics, they're essential skills, aren't they? If anyone even wants to understand politics, they're essential skills.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
And I can't comment on what is allowed at schools now. We generally, at colleges and at universities, we have debating clubs, even if it's not in the curriculum, so that it's extra curriculum. You can join these groups that are a debating society, so to speak. And I've no idea if they have them or not at state schools. But yes, it's part of the whole closing down of any critical or free thinking.
It's really dangerous.
It's not about enabling people, it's about turning them into the next slaves. Isn't it?
I wish that people could see it. With the independent media and how it's grown, so you and your team head up Unity Media, and there's the Canary, there's Squawk Box, and Socialist Telly, it's called, isn't it? And there's various other.
There are 44 of us in the Independent Media Association.
Right.
That includes like Double Down News, video vloggers, bloggers, and some of us are ex-journalists that have decided that we're going to tell the truth.
Yeah.
And we've got to a stage in our lives where we're able to do that. So, you know, I think that I've had an argument before now with people who have come from a troubled council estate background, and they feel that they are more working class than me. So they are very angry about the fact that perhaps I don't think like them quite, because I was born in the middle of the countryside, and everybody I knew was a farm labourer or a farmer, or you know, just worked in the local village shop, or you know, I didn't know anybody who lived in a council estate and had to go and work in a factory when I was a child, but I did know people who were trying to survive in the country, who'd been born and bred in the country for generations. So I don't know why, but they thought that made me different to them. It made me not so working class as them, didn't have as good credentials as them. But I said, the thing is, yes, I was lucky to be living in the middle of nowhere. I thought I was very lucky to be living in the middle of nowhere, and you know, just going to the village school. But because of that, I've been able to become a free thinking, critical thinking, grown up adult with compassion and socialism rooted deep inside me. So why I enable now, because of my news, I anybody can write a story for us, anybody. And it doesn't matter if they can't spell, it doesn't matter if they can't put sentences together particularly, but they've got a point they really want to get across.
Yeah.
So they send me their stuff, I edit it.
Yeah.
And I put it out.
That's
so
good.
my education is just as valuable as a working class person who was brought up on a council estate with their parents working minimum wage jobs. My dad was an engineer, so he was all right, and my mum was a hairdresser.
Yeah.
So yeah, not particularly working class jobs, but then again, not anything special.
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying. I think where it gets difficult is that it's not about hierarchies. No one can choose where they're born. Or, you know, you can't choose what social class you're born into or what jobs your parents do or anything like that. It's not about some people being better or of more value or less value. But I think it's the same as with racism or sexism or anything else. The system treats people who are from, you know, certain social class backgrounds unfairly, and
Definitely.
there is,
creates prejudice.
It creates prejudice, and these kind of, I think Gramsci talked about this cultural hegemony, what we believe is normal and what we believe is inevitable. You know, obviously capitalism is part of that, isn't it? Culturally, there's very, very little questioning of everything that goes along with capitalism, like individualism, competing. You know, in school, a lot of that culture of capitalism is pushed on kids, you know, that on the one hand, we're
all forced to compete.
Yeah, and not everybody is competitive. Not all kids love sport, you know, and it's kind of, it seems to be valued much more.
We're competitive, not just in sport, in everything.
Yeah.
You know, who got the best O levels? Who got the best A levels?
Yes.
Well, actually, who cares how many O levels or A levels you got? Can you build a house?
Yes.
Can you unblock a drain?
Yeah. Can you do something useful?
yes, definitely. Well, get off your high horse then, and you're going to have to earn enough money to pay a plumber or a sparky.
Yeah. So I think some of it is about this false narrative around social mobility and aspiration, that everyone should be aspiring and getting better and better and better jobs, without thinking, well, actually, what we've learned from this pandemic is that the jobs that are have been considered to be of less value are the ones that have actually kept us all going. They're the
We
ones.
used to have a debate about this
Yeah.
years ago, of that if the government or whoever announces that, like Thatcher's, if this is in Thatcher's time, the working class are able to be socially mobile. So everybody became a yuppie,
Yeah.
and they were all socially mobile upwards, right? So what happened, for every person that went up in the world, there was somebody who was a child of an up person had to go down in the world,
Of course.
didn't they?
Yeah. Nobody ever talks about that.
But no, it was never going to work, was it? The government or the people that have were never going to allow the have-nots to usurp their position,
of course,
or endanger their cash reserves.
Yeah.
So it was never. It was a lie. It was always a lie.
Yeah.
And sorry, go on. Next question.
No, it's a lie, and it's been going on for years. Like the trickle down, this thing that if we have if the GDP continues to rise and rise and rise, then that will be good for everyone in the economy. No, it's not, and the evidence tells us that it's not. But it's still something that gets perpetuated, and it goes unquestioned by mainstream.
And I don't think all of us. I would say all of us, perhaps 97% of us, independent media, all came about because of Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, I'm an ex-journo, so I know how corrupt the mainstream media is. Absolutely corrupt. So I felt that before that, if I'd said anything, I was just a lone voice shouting into the void.
Yeah.
We are, all of us, still a small voice.
Yeah.
And some of us are just shouting into our own echo chambers. If you go out into the general public, nobody's ever heard of us.
Yeah.
And if you go to people offline, they definitely, how would they have heard of us? Because we're all online.
Yeah.
None of us, well, with the only thing that we've got is the Morning Star, which is just now becoming more brave to speak out, and less marginalized, in that their audience is listening a bit more. There is a bit more of an audience to listen.
Yeah.
And the Word newspaper, which has been going, well, that was since Jeremy Corbyn became leader of the Labour Party as well.
Right.
So I think it enabled that whole event, let's call it an event, of him winning the leadership, a socialist person winning. He's not even really socialist. He's just an ordinary person who had a very good job and he enjoyed his platform. He used his platform to speak about stop the war, and peace and justice. So he's not a particularly left. He's definitely not a hard left.
No.
So I think that all of us, there are 44 of us in the Independent Media Association, and there are 16 of us in Independent Media UK, which are all like Facebook pages. We all do Facebook pages. The Independent Media Association is mostly websites, although they'll have a Facebook presence too. But we would never have been heard of before because we didn't exist. Yes, but some of us that became the Canary, that became Unity News, that became Squawkbox, we all were shouting beforehand. It's just that we didn't feel our voice was valid, or we didn't have an audience.
Yeah.
So that's what's happened.
Yeah. So what needs to happen next, or what would make this? Because I'm thinking it's probably going to be, people who were already interested in the Labour Party, interested in socialism, interested in left politics, already switched onto politics, that are probably tuned in. And how can we now at this point reach beyond that? What's the next step? Any ideas?
I've no idea, because we've even been shut out now of the Labour Party. We can't speak to anyone inside the Labour Party anymore, because they're not left wing at all.
Okay. Yeah.
The only people that we do still speak to, we are speaking to outside the Labour Party.
Mm-hmm.
So friendships that we created, that we've built over the last 5 years, we are talking in back channels.
Yeah.
And we are cooperating with each other to make sure that the relevant stories
and
are told.
Yes. Yeah.
And the relevant messages are got out.
Yeah.
And also that, to a certain extent, the people that used to have their voice heard by the Labour Party are no longer having their voice heard by the Labour Party at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
So all those people now are restricted to a very narrow channel of us.
Mm-hmm.
They come to us at independent media, and we tell the few MPs that we have back channel chats with what the people are really thinking, what they're really doing. So,
but I think a lot of people would be interested to know about what it's like behind the scenes working for a news organisation. What's the culture of that like? What sorts of people end up working in those environments, and what kind of qualities do you need to survive?
90% Oxford, Cambridge, and Eton.
Right. Yeah. So you will have been
at all levels. All levels.
Yeah.
90% of mainstream media. It's 90%. Special university educated, not just any university, but special university. Yes, of course, there are the odd journalists that make it to the top of the tree, but usually by capitulating to some degree to not speaking about this. We don't want to speak about that, thank you. Or being outright, the only one that seems to have got away with it a bit is Victoria Derbyshire.
Yeah.
She's been able, but I think she does spend a lot of her time platforming. I can't think of her health, Hugh Pym, her health guy.
Yeah.
He talks about the NHS. He makes the privatization of our NHS edible.
Okay.
For the general public.
Right. Okay.
So she's allowed to have people on like Dr. Bob Gill, or Rishi Deer, or other doctors, talking about the fact that they are being crucified by the government. They're being unsupported, unpaid, forced into. They're not allowed to eat on duty. They're not allowed to drink on duty, and they're on duty for 18 hours. So they're not allowed to have a drink or eat while they do that.
Right.
Things like that, little things like that. So the only way that she can get those stories out there is to have Hugh Pym countering every single argument that anyone puts forward with, but the government are never going to privatise the NHS. Look over here, there's nothing wrong. So there's absolutely every way. It's a very clever strategy. In the media, you can go into the media with Labour values. After a little while, you become acclimatized to the good wage. Perhaps you'll get a good wage and a privileged way of life. You'll be looked up to by those in the local area. If you're a local journalist that's, made good, gone on, always on TV, they will look up to you. That soon you become acclimatized to that, and you start to change.
Right.
And when the editor or the producer says, you can't say it like that, you've got to say it so that the corporate looks good, not the people. The people are wrong, and you need to tell them that they're wrong by saying how right this is.
Okay.
So yeah, it's quite.
So is that the more or less the training that you get is on the job? It's a culture, and it's
Well, now the training for media now is done in, well, it always was done in Oxford and Cambridge or Eton, and other privileged universities are available. It was exclusively taught in, I'm not even sure it was exclusively taught. That was the only way in. It was, your brother is Viscount so and so, and your uncle is Lord that. So you went to school with Sir Davies' brother. So here's a job at the Daily Express. Here's a job on the BBC. Here's a job on ITV. So it was only, I think, in 1990 that media started to be taught at colleges and universities across the country, ordinary universities. Before that, you would have a degree in English,
right,
or or some suitable degree that would get you in the door making cups of tea in the newsroom. And that was the only way you could get in if you weren't Oxford or Cambridge.
Right. You had to
And
start
not
there.
to say that some people didn't make it.
Yeah.
So a lot of people do make it, but then you become acclimatized, like you start to live in the bubble. So you stop noticing the beggar or the person, the homeless person sleeping on the street. You step over them and don't report their story, when that's the story you should be reporting.
Yeah. So it's more of a network. If you want to get on in media, you need to be part of that informal network, usually, by and large.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if working class people are very much on the outside of journalism, it's not a career that's sort of, well, I mean, if you sort of described yourself as not necessarily somewhere between working class and middle class, maybe, and that it's difficult enough even in that position to get a foothold within journalism. So if working class people are absolutely on the outside of that, and they're on the outside of politics in any meaningful sense, if we've only got 3% of MPs, and on the outside of filmmaking, like, we used to have more accurate representations of working class life and culture that weren't denigrating working class people in the old days, like in the 80s or whatever. We used to have working class film makers and actors and writers, and to a much greater extent than we do now. And I think because working class people are squeezed out of all of those, I don't know, it's like, how can they don't have the inside view on how those things shape culture in turn, if you know what I mean. So if you've got a behind the scenes view of how the media works, how corrupt it is, how that culture works, it's like an old boys network type thing. And it's favors, people are let in on a nod and a wink and that kind of thing. If you have within your class culture an understanding of how that works, you're not going to be as susceptible to those poisonous, toxic messages that are being pumped out. It's
exactly. Yes. So that would be a way forward. And we do try to do that. Of course, with we don't get invited onto Zoom events, particularly, that are going to you know, because of course the Labour Party has been so closed down now that that they're not allowed to talk to anybody who might have a dissenting voice anymore.
Yeah.
So that cuts out us as well as the rest of the working class and ordinary people. It shuts us all out. So how we're going to combat that now, I've no idea, but perhaps we could do a few Zoom events like that. I think that's a very good idea.
I think that would be great if you could get a few people that are working within independent media who've got a history of working within mainstream media, who can describe exactly how that system works, what's wrong with it, you know, and how it shapes our beliefs.
And why we shouldn't continue to be fooled by them.
Okay. Well, that's...
Anything else?
No, I don't think so. I think I've asked everything that I wanted to ask about. It's really good of you to come on. Thank you very much for agreeing to come on.
Well, once you've edited it and got it all together, then do send me it and I'll put it out everywhere.
Okay, that'd be brilliant. Thank you very much.
All right. Speak to you later.
Bye.